So it is a few seconds to 9:30, I believe. So good morning to everyone who is attending our webinar today on Zoom and on Facebook Live. Maayong buntag. My name is Kimbe. I am the program coordinator of Democracy Watch, and I will be your moderator for today's event. So following the Vote Right 2022 launch last February 22, this is the second installment in the Vote Right series. So this particular voter education forum is for students from Visayas and Mindanao. And later on, we will try something a little new. We will be making use of Slido, if you're familiar with that platform. So please log on to Slido in a bit, and I will be sending the join link in the chat box in a little while. You may also leave your questions here or via the question and answer feature on Zoom or Slido. But to first begin our program, I will turn over the floor to Stratbase Albert Del Rosario Institute President, Professor Dindo Manhit, to deliver the opening remarks. Professor Dindo is a well-regarded strategist who has built winning public affairs campaigns, integrating message development, public relations, and the mobilization of grassroots support. So, Professor Dindo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kim, and good morning to our participants. I think we had registration of over 200 from support groups, educators, champions, students from the Visayas and Mindanao area. Salamat po for joining us and registering, and we hope that they can all join us in the next few minutes. I remember nearly 9 years ago, a little over 8 years, when we started. I was one of the conveners of Democracy Watch. At the time, we were standing up against corruption. This was the Napoles scandal, how legislators who continue to run for public office were misusing public funds. And it reminds me, as we start this Visayas and Mindanao webinar on Vote Right 2022, because in Stratbase ADRi Institute, a partner of Democracy Watch, we continue to track issues. And as we track issues, we've noticed how economic issues are very important. I think maybe 2 years of the pandemic, we feel that there is this economic consequences of this long health emergency. But we always take note of graft and corruption. It's always there. Issue of governance. But when you look at this, presyo ng bilihin, kita at trabaho, kahirapan, and with kahirapan I always add gutom. So when we asked this question, we wanted to understand, especially when we saw it having similar results from a December question that we had. Sorry, I have to start the opening remarks with my other hat. I'm a researcher by nature. And when you look at December, it's really, we start looking at what is the most important consideration when choosing a candidate. We saw the result this February. And in this February, we started looking at this characteristic, which I will show in my next slide. Untarnished character and reputation. Not corrupt. Has clear program or platform of action. Has extensive experience in governance. Knowledge in the management of governance. I share these ideas, these thoughts, because I'll give you a few seconds. Who do you imagine this candidate? Among maybe there's 9, but I consider there's 5 candidates, major candidates, given the latest surveys and polls. And it's no different from what? In a different question, but we asked last December, where has concern for the poor is important, not corrupt, honest and trustworthy. So we said, why don't we ask voters and go deeper into their choices? If you find these characteristics, if you want a leader with an untarnished character and reputation, one that is not corrupt, one that is pro-poor, one that has extensive experience in governance, to whom do you associate this with? And we see these numbers. In quantitative research, as I talk to students and academics in this webinar, we know that data does not lie, especially if it's run scientifically. But at times, it surprises us. You look at the names, you look at the characteristics, most honest and trustworthy. Do you agree? As great concern for the poor, least corrupt. Do you agree? As clear plan to address the country's problem. That means detailed program of government identified, being discussed publicly. Do you agree with the results? Will best defend the country against China? Considering, in a different question, 82% of Filipinos would like us to assert our rights against China to protect our maritime integrity and our territorial rights. So, when you look at these numbers, or these numbers, I ask myself, as an academic, as a political observer, I think when Democracy Watch was established, we were fighting corruption. It's still there. We have not really institutionalized the capacity of the state to run after and make public officials accountable for the act, especially corrupt acts. But I worry for something else in 2020. I call it the pandemic of disinformation. We have to admit that we are not in the same media environment today. With the closure of ABS-CBN, we lost a national TV network that has reach, powerful reach beyond Mega Manila. But what we saw is it has an effect. Why? We see the importance still of TV, but we know how limited TV is. But we saw also the rise of the internet. Radio seems to have gotten down. But what I worry more is that the most influential source of information in choosing their president, surprising to us, is the rise of internet. Internet, social media is an important tool, especially as we shift to digital life in the Philippines. It has cut across, especially during this pandemic, demographics. Happy to have seen people from lower social class, challenged even by income, seeing the value of technology. But what I worry is that there is so much disinformation in social media. And if 21% of Filipinos see it as important, as an important source, considering it was just 2% in 2016, that for me is a concern. Especially when you look at most used social platforms like Facebook, YouTube, very popular. The problem with this is that they might have been hijacked by social media influencers, groups, productions in YouTube that goes against basic fact-checking, basic editorial discipline. Just talking about true historical data. And what is the truth? Government data represents that. What is the truth? Publications of international groups also. As we have moved to spending more time in the internet, I really worry about this. That maybe our own people, that's why we are here, I am here, standing up with Democracy Watch. The use of the internet is important. But what if it's being used for disinformation? Especially when you look at the rise of social media users. 92 million Filipinos. Some even would say, is that true? Or is that multiple accounts? Or when you look at the future of the country, I speak of the 18 to 44. That's 49% of our voters. Very heavy users of Facebook, Instagram. And this is where we are in Philippine democracy. We cannot have disinformation, not only in elections, but even in governance. Because we go back to the core of why I joined some good Filipino citizens standing up for what democracy is. It's about good governance, transparency, accountability, responsive public services. But what if they are creating disinformation, projecting that they are transparent, accountable, and responsible public service? Today's social media space is infected with the pandemic of disinformation. I wrote about this on the eve of our celebration of EDSA 1, perpetrated by forces who need to distort historical facts. Otherwise, their objective to seize power will be defeated. Disinformation on platforms, social media platforms, could bring about severe consequences to Philippine growth, to Philippine development, and overall democracy. That's why here, with Strat-based ADRi Institute, we continue to support Democracy Watch. We continue to support institutions like CommonLand, PPCRB. But today, we should be mindful and must boldly combat disinformation with untiring passion and resolve. And it does not end in May 9. In Democracy Watch and in our institute, we will continue to champion, fight against disinformation as we move towards a new government. Because governance, there's no room for disinformation in governance. Again, good morning. Thank you for joining us all in our virtual town hall discussion with stakeholders from the Visayas and the Mindanao Islands. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dindo. That was a truly insightful talk. I think that truly there are issues that need to be addressed by the candidates to come. And this actually opens the portion that I was mentioning earlier here. So for the students, you can join on Slido now. I hope you can see my screen. You should be able to see my screen. So please just log on to the Slido and we can have a test question first. So this is something that we're doing to also see what issues matter to you students and to you stakeholders. So let's see first if anyone is on the Slido. Okay, so some aren't really excited for face-to-face classes. That's okay. It is the pandemic. So I'll just give it a minute so that people can log on to Slido. And actually, the opening remarks does set a good, it sets the tone for the rest of our program today because we will be talking about core values of citizenship. We will also be talking about the automated elections, and disinformation later on. So we will see how we as students, how we as the youth can also help in combating disinformation, especially as we near the 2022 national elections. It's less than, I think it's less than 50 days to go, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so yan. A lot are excited, some are undecided. Okay, so we see people in the Slido now. I will be stopping this poll and actually I will be asking the real next two questions. So, okay. Yeah, I'm sure 2 years of schooling online or via modular or blended learning is also very difficult. I can't imagine having to sit through like online classes every single day. That for sure is tiring. Okay, thank you. Thank you to the students and to the participants. I will change the poll now. Hope you can see it. So here, please just enter whatever word comes into your mind. As for the issues that you would like to see discussed in the coming election, and I'm sure that, okay, so West Philippine Sea, that remains corruption. Corruption is a big concern. Education, of course. Raising salary, political dynasties, oh. Poverty, corruption, economy, human rights, martial law, COVID-19. Keep them coming. Okay. A lot of votes for corruption and education. Platforms. Corruption. Yeah. Corruption remains a big problem. Here at Democracy Watch, we strongly advocate for transparency and accountability in order to combat corruption. And recently, we also had another town hall discussion talking about how transparency, digitization can help with transparency. EJKs, cost of living, using salary, platforms. This is fun. Economy, China. With our partner institute, the strat-based ADRi Institute, they do studies on the West Philippine Sea and how, so you can look it up, adrinstitute.org. They have a lot of work, knowledge products on the West Philippine Sea. Human rights. So corruption remains to be a very pertinent concern. All right. These are good. These are very key issues. And if you notice, actually, corruption, poverty, and corruption, these are some of the top issues that Professor Manhit mentioned earlier on in his presentation. So, and even issues of the economy, raising salary, and to a certain extent, the West Philippine Sea. I will point out that it's interesting that corruption, education, raising salary, they're a bit higher than COVID-19. Word clouds are fun. Okay, so that's the first question. I will be closing it now. And we have a second question before we move on to our next speaker. And that is, what would you like to learn more during this voter education session? So our speakers have already prepared their topics beforehand, but I think it's good to gauge what it is that you would like to learn more so that if they don't bring it up, we can ask it during the Q&A and so on. So fact checking, okay. Let's see what else. COMELEC disqualification. Yes, Director James Jimenez from the COMELEC will be joining us later. Politics. What exactly about politics though? Like fact checking, especially with the rise of social media. As Professor Manhit noted, we have 92 million social media users. Is my candidate worth voting for? I'm assuming is my candidate worth voting for because there's a character limit. Voting machines, voting system, process of voting. Yeah, especially if you're a first-time voter, the vote counting machine may seem intimidating, but with COMELEC and PPCRV, they're very helpful. Educate youth in fake news, right? Biased. about biases. Truth about martial law, vote wisely, vote buying, how reliable the results. I'm guessing that's a question on how reliable survey results are. I could be wrong, but social weather stations and Pulse Asia are reputable survey firms, survey organizations, and they do employ academic rigor in their surveys and their sampling. So they are reliable. Vote buying, that's very interesting. Safety of voting process. Safety as in light of the COVID-19 situation. I will take note of that. That can be asked later. Voting rights. In the Vote Right 2022 launch, you can see there's a recording of it uploaded online. Attorney Ona Caritos of the Legal Network for Truthful Elections, she gave a talk on your rights as voters. So also, I will take this time to remind or to announce to the participants that if you require or if you would like a certificate of participation, please feel free to email me at my Democracy Watch email. It's listed on your Zoom registration link, I think. Please feel free to email me requesting for a certificate. Because some of you, if you joined us in our launch also, some of you had requested last time. So, okay, truth, timely issues, history of candidates. I don't think we'll be able to go into the history of candidates per se, but opinion versus fact. That's good. All right, I will close the poll in a minute. I think these are very interesting live streaming of vote counting. So later we'll have the chance to ask Director Jimenez on these issues as well. Honesty of both sides. Does this refer to candidates? So fact checking, okay. So politics, voting system, accuracy of vote counting, fact checking, vote buying, process of voting. Okay, this is good. Character building, timely issues. So first, youth. All right. So I think these are helpful. Thank you. We will be integrating this in the Q&A later. So that is the second portion of our activity today. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, Dr. Arwin Serrana. Sadly, he could not make it today, but he so generously carved out time in his schedule to do a recording for us. So here to speak on the values that you see in good citizens or the values of good citizenship, we have Trustee and Director of Voter Education for the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible Voting, Dr. Arwin Serrana.
Magandang umaga sa ating lahat at ako na may nagagalak dahil ang aking pong mga kasama ay ang mga kabataan. At talagang itong ipapabahagi ko sa inyo ay para sa inyo mga kabataang botante. At ang titulungan ng ating ibabahagi sa inyo ngayon ay iboboto ko Maka-Pilipinas. Ang ating pong pag-uusapan ay hindi naman din bago sa ating lahat. Kasi nga ito ay hinango sa ating 1987 Freedom Constitution. At lalo-lalo na sa ating preamble na kung saan ay aming kinuha itong mga 16 good citizenship core values. Yung pagiging maka-Diyos, makatao, makabayan, at makakalikasan. Sa maka-Diyos, meron po tayong 5 katangian or pamantayan na ating pong hanapin sa ating pong mga kandidato, mapanasyonal man o mapalokal. Ang susunod naman ay makatao. 5 rin po yan at ganun din sa makabayan. At tanging nag-iisa lang po yung makakalikasan. Kaya all in all po ay 16. Ito nga po yung ating pong 16 good citizenship values. Simulan na natin sa pagiging maka-Diyos. Pag inisip natin yung maka-Diyos, ang una sigurong papasok sa isipan natin, siya ay isang madasali na tao. Siya ay nagsisimba at least tuwing linggo. Sa mga ilan sa ating Katoliko, nagro-rosaryo at naglalaan ng oras o panahon para pagnilayan ang salita ng Diyos, hindi lang binabasa, kundi sinasabuhay pa. Antayan natin na matatawag nga na siya, ang taong yan, ay maka-Diyos. Pero hindi lamang po yan. Kailangan meron din pagpapahalaga at respeto sa buhay at pamilya. Kaya nga sa atin ay napakahalaga ang tao o kandidato nagpapahalaga sa buhay. Kasi ang buhay ay galing sa Diyos at pamilya. Kasi nga naman, ang kandidato o tao na nagbibigay pagpapahalaga sa pamilya, ito ay patuloy niyang pagpapayabungin, pasisiglain, paigtingin, at talaga namang poprotektahan at mamahalin. Kaya gusto natin ang mga kandidato na mayroong pagpapahalaga sa buhay at pamilya. Pangatlo, mayroong makabuluhan at matino ang pamumuhay. Sino ba naman sa atin ang magkakagusto sa isang tao na talagang sandamakbak ang bisyo? Hindi maayos at magulo ang pamumuhay. Kinainisan at talaga namang walang matibay na pagpapahalaga sa kanyang sarili. Kaya ang taong mayroong makabuluhan at matino ang pamumuhay ay matatawag nating maka-Diyos. Pang-apat ay yung merong masigasig na tumulong makaahon ang iba. Hindi lang para sa iilan. Hindi tayo namimili. Pagkus inaalam natin at kinikilala natin, lalong-lalo na yung mga nasa laylayan. Yung mga mahihirap, yung palagi na lamang napipigati, nalulungkot, nahihirapan. At ang ating pagpapakita, lalong-lalo na sa mga ganitong mga sektor, ay matatawag nating maka-Diyos. Kasi nga, ang Diyos ay pantay ang pagtingin. Ang Diyos ay talaga namang kinikilala at talagang tumutulong sa lahat. Hindi namimili. At panghuli, merong malinaw na pananaw sa makabagong bukas. Alam niyo, i-correct niyo ako kung mali. Noong tinanong ang mga kabataan, ano ba ang mga gusto ninyo sa isang kandidato? At 5 po ang kanilang sinabi. Una, gusto nila ang kandidato na hindi magtatangkilik sa anumang uri ng graft and corruption. Kami rin po na nakatatanda ninyo, ayaw po rin namin sa mga ganong kandidato. Pangalawa, gusto ng kabataan na merong pagpapairal ng disiplina, medyo stricto, at patas at makatarungan. Kami rin po, gusto rin po namin yon. Pangatlo, gusto nila yung merong matibay, maayos, at talaga namang merong pagpapahalaga sa edukasyon. Kaya nga kabataan, kaya malapit sa kanila ang edukasyon. Gusto rin namin ang mga ganong kandidato. Ika-4, gusto nila na nag-aalis o makatulong para hindi na lumaganap ang anumang uri ng mga tukso o magpapagulo sa kanilang kaisipan at sa kanilang pamumuhay, katulad nga ng drug addiction. Kami rin po, ayaw rin po namin yun. Kasi gusto natin ang ating kabataan ay makapag-focus sa kanilang mga dapat gawin. At ikalima, ang gusto ng kabataan ay merong pagpapahalaga at makikitaan nila na meron silang makikitang magandang bukas o kinabukasan. At gusto namin din ang mga ganitong kandidato. Kaya nga sigurado ko na ang mga aking mga binanggit ay mga gusto rin ninyo, mga ginigilo naming kabataan. Pang-apat, yung merong masigasig na tumulong, makaahon ang bawat isa, walang iwanan para sa lahat, lalong-lalo na nga yung mga nahirapan. At merong pananaw sa makabagong bukas at talaga naman kinikilala ito ng ating mga kabataan. Tunguhin naman natin ang pagiging makatao. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng maging makatao? Hindi lamang sa pamilya, kakilala o mga kaibigan, kundi sa kahit hindi natin kilala, sa bawat Pilipino at kababayan natin. Kung tayo ay marunong makipagkapwa, tayo ay marunong makipag-ugnayan sa kahit kanino, ito ay pagpapakita natin ng pagiging makatao. Lima po yan. Una, ang pagiging makalinga at maalalahanin. Paano ba natin ipapahayag o maipapakita ang ating pagiging makalinga at maalalahanin? Talaga namang maririnig natin sa mga sasabihin ng mga kandidato na mahal ko ang mga mahihirap, tutulungan ko sila, aalagaan ko kayo mga kabataan. Hindi lamang po sa lip service o LIP, kung hindi po sa pareho rin na tunog, pero LEAP, lundag lip service. At gusto natin na talaga naman ipapakita nila ito kahit na ito ay mahirap, pero kailangan madama, lalong-lalo na ng mga nangangailangan. Pangalawa, makakalayaan. Nung isang buwan lang, sinelebra natin ang ika-36 na araw ng ating pagkundita sa People Power Revolution. At marami nagsasabi sa akin, Doc Arwin, nawala ng saysay yung ginawa natin noon. Parang naging wala, na bigla na lang humina at tuluyan na nga nawala. Ganun nga ba talaga? Para sa akin, ito ay continuing process. Hindi lamang po sa ilang araw, ilang linggo, ilang buwan, ilang taon after that, kung ang ating ng mga bayani na nagbuwis ng kanilang sariling buhay, 150 taon na nakakaraan, ay patuloy pa rin nating kinikilala at sinasariwa at tinatamasa ang kasarinlan at kalayaan na meron tayo ngayon. Kaya ito'y tuloy-tuloy. At gusto natin ang mga kandidato na makakalayaan. Pangatlo, makakapayapaan. Alam niyo sa amin sa PPCRB, ito ay isa sa mga sinusulong namin. Yung letter P ng word na champ. Yung peace. Gusto ba natin na ang mga kandidato, siya pa mangunguna ng mga gulo, karahasan, o mga panggugulo? Nalulungkot nga tayo at nababagabag doon sa gera sa bandang Europa. At pinagdadasal natin, harinawa, matigil na yon at magkaroon na sila ng magandang pagkakaunawaan. Kasi nga, ayaw natin ng anumang uri ng karahasan. Pagkus, ang gusto natin, itong ating darating na halalan, ay magiging mapayapa at maayos. At talaga namang hindi dapat katakutan. Ika-4, ang pagiging makatotoo. Sabi nga, honesty is the best policy. Pinag-aralan natin yan at kasalukuyan pa nga nating pinagtitibay sa ating puso't isipan. Alam niyo, kapag ang isang tao magkamali man, madapa man, pero magsasabi ng totoo, magiging tapat, madali kayo at agad-agad kayo maintindihan, maunawaan, at talaga naman tutulungan sa pagkabangon sa inyong pagkadapa. Sino ba sa atin ang gusto, lalo-lalo na kayong mga babae na nanonood at nakikinig kayo, manliligaw sa inyo, pero manloloko naman pala. Ayaw natin nun. Ayaw natin sa sinungaling. Ayaw natin sa mga hindi nagsasabi ng totoo. Pagkus ang gusto natin, makatotoo at tapat sa kanilang mga dinideklara at sinasabi. At panghuli ay ang pagiging makatarungan. Nabanggit ko na nga yan ng papyaw doon sa 5 katangian na gusto ng ating mga kabataang botante sa mga humarap sa kanilang mga kandidato. At talaga naman, ang pagiging makatarungan ay pagiging makatao. Gusto natin na lagyan ng disiplina at lagyan ng respeto at lagyan ng pagkilala ang lahat, lalong-lalo na sa mga namumuno at binigyan ng pagkakataon na tayo ay pamunuan. So after maka-Diyos, makatao, ngayon naman ang pagiging makabayan. 5 rin po yan at isasama na rin natin dito ang makakalikasan. Nahirapan ba tayo na sumunod sa mga simpleng batas sa ating bansa? Alam ninyo, bawal po yung hinahayaan na pagalain natin ang ating mga alagang hayop. Pero pansinin ninyo, marami pa rin sa atin na nakakakita ng mga alagang hayop na gumagala sa ating mga lansangan. Bawal din po sa atin ang naglalabas ng basura. Pero pansinin ninyo, kahit yung sa kanto kung saan tayo nakatira, merong mag-uumpok doon ng basura. At ginagawa pa nga ito ng patago at ilalabas sa 10 oras ng gabi. Tama po ba yun? Eh doon sa mga simpleng mga batas na yan, nahirapan na tayo sumunod. How much more doon sa mas lalong mga mabibigat at mas lalong mga batas na dapat nating sundin. At tinutulungan pa nga natin iba na makasunod at palaganapin. So, una, yung pagiging inclusive, makasama ang lahat, hindi mangiiwan. Diba sabi nga, sana all. Paano naman kami? Walang iwanan. Tunay nga na kailangan tayo ay pantay-pantay sa ating pagtingin. Sila man ay mangmang, dukha, at parang tinatawag natin na labas sa lipunan o yung mga outcast. Ganun ba dapat? O kinakailangan sila rin at lalong-lalo na sila na dapat nating tulungan, dapat nating alalayan. Kaya gusto natin ang mga kandidato na merong pagtingin para sa lahat at hindi namimili. Pangalawa, ang pagiging makatuwiran at ang pinapairal na panuntunan, ang pinapairal na mga regulasyon ay talaga namang hindi makakaapekto, makakagambala o kaya magbibigay pa ng dagdag hirap lalong-lalo na sa ating mga tinatawag na nasa laylayan. Gusto natin na mapagaan, mapaayos, maging komportable, at talagang maayos na tirhan ang mundo, ang ating bansa, at ang kanilang pamayanan. Pangatlo, ito na nga yung pinaka-meat ng ating pinag-uusapan ngayon na kanina pa, yung pagsunod sa mga batas. Kahit na mga simpleng batas, kahit na sa batas na parang nahirapan tayo o ayaw natin. Basta't ito ay mga batas sa ating bansa, kailangan natin sundin. Kailangan natin alamin. At kailangan pa natin ito, kung kakayanin natin, na palaganapin. Ika-4, ang pagiging makabayan. Kapag nakakarinig ba tayo ng mga patriotic songs, basta lang ba natin ito kinakanta? Hindi ba natin nadadama yung mga liriko at laman at sinasaad ng mga kantang yon? Katulad ng Bayan Ko, Pilipinas Kong Mahal, at iba pang mga patriotic songs. Yan ay para lalong hindi mawala sa isipan natin ang ating dapat na pagmamahal sa ating inang bayan. At hinahanap din natin ito sa ating mga kandidatong aplikante na humaharap sa atin. Paano ba nila maipapakita ang kanilang pagiging makabayan? At panghuli, makapagpapataguyod ng kapakanan at kabutihan pang lahat. Para sa lahat, hindi lang para sa iilan. Hindi yung mayaman na nga, napoprotektahan pa sila. Hindi nga yung mahirap na nga sila, patuloy mo pang pahirapin ang kabuhayan nila. Gusto natin ang mga kandidato na merong ganitong pag-iisip at merong ganitong mga adikain at merong ganitong mga programa at plataforma na para sa lahat. So after maka-Diyos, maka-tao, makabayan, ito na yung panghuli, ika-4, ang makakalikasan. Alam ninyo, noong nakaraang linggo, nagselebra ng ika-9 na taon ang ating Santo Papa. At sa kanyang unang 2 taon ng pagiging Papa, ay talaga naman binigyan niya ng pansin itong ating inang kalikasan. At sa kanyang sinulat na encyclical, dokumento na naging libro, yung Laudato Si, sabi niya roon na lahat ng ito ay nagsisimula sa ating pagmamahal sa ating mga sarili-sariling tahanan. Tunay nga. Paano ba natin maipapakita yung ating pagmamahal sa ating inang kalikasan kung sa ating sariling mga pamamahay ay hindi na tayo maayos? At pinababayaan natin na lalong hindi gumanda o bumuti pagkus pinalalala pa natin. At wala dapat tayong ituturo. Bagamat totoo naman na meron tayong mga ahensya at mga pangunahing mga opisyal na dapat na manguna sa pangangasiwa para hindi lalong makawawa ang ating kalikasan. Pero lahat po tayo ay magkakasama dito sa layunin na ito. Meron ba tayong ambag? Meron ba tayong kontribusyon para sa ating pagpapakita ng ating pagmamahal sa ating kalikasan? Gusto natin ang mga kandidato na humaharap sa atin ay merong magandang pagtingin sa ating kalikasan at paano pa maibabalik yung ganda at sigla ng ating kalikasan. Kayo mga kabataan ay hindi nyo na nakita yung dating Pilipinas, yung dating Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. Siguro napapansin na natin na parang mas umiinit na, mas lalo na lumalala yung epekto ng bagyo. At parang madalas na yung mga sakuna. Lahat ng ito ay interrelated, magkakaugnay dahil sa kapabayaan natin sa ating kalikasan. At tarinawa, itong darating na halalan ay makapag-isip, makapagpanukala at makapagbigay ng magagandang programa para sa ating kalikasan. So mga ginigiliw kong mga kabataan na naghahanda ngayon sa ating nalalapit na halalan. At naniniwala ko na meron pa tayong sapat na panahon. Gawin nating gabay, giya o tulong para sa atin para makagawa tayo ng listahan ng mga karapat-dapat na kandidato para sa nasyonal hanggang lokal. Napakahalaga na patuloy tayong maging mapanuri, patuloy nating kilatisin, patuloy nating kilalanin at bigyan ng sapat na panahon itong ating pagpili. Kung tayo nga ay masyadong mapili sa ating pagbili ng bag, damit o sapatos, edi how much more pa ito? Mas lalo pa dapat. Kaya wag agad-agad tayo na magdidesisyon kasi meron pa namang sapat na panahon. At ilista natin. Bakit natin ililista? Kasi sa ating gagawing paglista, ito ay malaking gabay at tulong sa atin. Hindi tayo magkakamali. Mapapabilis pa yung ating gagawing proseso ng pagboto sa ating mga respective na presinto. At wag na natin tanggapin yung mga sample ballots na pilit na binibigay sa atin ng mga bata. Bawal po yun. Campaigning is a crime. Kung ito ay illegal na gagawin. bawal na po ang mga panya isang araw bago maghalalan, di lalong-lalo na sa mismong araw ng halalan. Kaya, at saka magkakalat pa ito. Alam nyo ba, after election, ang isa sa mga malungkot na trabahador sa voting center ay yung janitor. Takot-takot na mga sample ballots yung nakakalat after election. Huwag na tayong dumagdag pa sa kalat na ito. Pagkus magkaroon tayo ng sariling listahan na talaga namang pinag-isipan at ipinagdasal. Ialay natin ang ating ginawang listahan sa ating Panginoon Diyos. At naniniwala ko na pagdating ng araw ng ating halalan on May 9, handang-handa na tayo, mga ginigiliw naming kabataan, para sa paghahandog ng napakagaling at napakatalinong boto sa napakahalagang eleksyon na ito. Bago ko magtapos, gusto kong bigyan ng pansin din, kung kayo ay mga 19 anyos na ngayon, pag dinagdagan namin ng 6 na taon ang iyong edad, lumalabas 25 anyos. Sa 25 anyos pa na yan, marami na kayong mga gustong gawin. Malinaw na rin kahit papaano ang mga pangarap natin. At yung iba sa inyo ay baka nag-iisip na rin na magkaroon ng sariling pamilya. Kaya mas mahalaga ito sa inyo kumpara sa amin. Kami na nakatatanda sa inyo, pinapahalagahan namin ito. Dapat mas lalo kayo. Maraming salamat at harinawa, marami tayong natutunan sa araw na ito. Hindi na sayang ang oras at panahon na inukol ninyo dito sa ating voters education na pinagkakaloob sa atin ng Democracy Watch. Again, dagang salamat, maayong buntag, God bless us all.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Serrano. That was a very insightful talk. He mentioned a lot of things, marami siyang binanggit that are important, maraming binanggit na mahalaga. I'd just like to reiterate a few points. He was saying that it's okay to be choosy, picky. Well, not okay, but he was saying that it's good to actually think carefully about who you're choosing to vote for in the coming elections. Also, take note, May 7 is the last day to campaign. You're not allowed to campaign the day before the elections. So that's May 8th. And more so on the actual day of the elections, May 9. And he also talks about really a lot of values that you as a citizen should have. And it's good to ask yourself if you hold the people that you elect to the same standards as we hold for ourselves. So there's really a lot to take away. And I hope it was helpful for you as it was for me. And that his last point on how in 6 years time, for you students who are in your late teens, early 20s, in 6 years time, you will be 25, 26, 27. And this is the age where you will be settling down or you will be doing more things at your prime. And it's good to keep your future in mind as you choose who to vote for in the coming elections. So moving forward, we have up next to talk about combating disinformation. We have Mr. Paco Pangalangan, the lead convener of Democracy Watch Philippines. He specializes in political risk analysis, policy development, and strategic communications, and over the last decade has worked with a wide range of sectors, including energy, technology, and public utilities. Sir, I turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Kim. Hi, good morning, everybody. Let me just share my screen now. So if you can just give me a second. Hala, portion of my screen. Okay, let me let me figure this out. Hala, what can you see, Kim?
I can see part I can see your Word file, and
Oh, you can see my Word file?
there we go. Now we can see
That's
slides and the ticker beside your slides. That's okay.
that's that's not what I wanted to show you.
We can
Wait
see your
lang, ah.
slides now.
Sige, I'll just go with the traditional one.
Yes. Okay.
Wait lang po. Let me see what
No worries. No worries.
you'd think after 2 years that I had to figure this out by now.
It's okay. It's not a problem.
Mother of God. Ito na yata. Ito na talaga. So you can see my power.
There.
Right?
Yeah, we can see your PowerPoint now. It's not in full screen though. There we go.
There. Now it is.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, but of course my problem now is that I've lost my código. But anyway, I'll do my best to get through this successfully. So thanks everybody. Thanks Kim, and thanks to all of our participants. Thank you for the patience and waiting for me to set this up and figure this out. I suddenly feel old given what I feel like the average age of the participants is. But I'll try my best to still sound hip and cool. No. Anyway, so Democracy Watch, right? Thank you this is our Vote Right voter education campaign for the year. And what I want to talk to you guys about today is combating the pandemic of disinformation. But before I do that, let me first talk to you about what Democracy Watch is. So if you didn't know, Democracy Watch is a citizen-led advocacy group. And among our advocacies and the things that we push for are, of course, good governance, which means like fighting for transparency and accountability, but also especially during every 3 years when there's an election, we are very active in voter education and electoral reform, because what we really want is to have a responsive government, which is inclusive and have a truly democratic political system. And we've been around for almost since 2013, I believe. And over those years, we've been quite busy. We've kept ourselves busy. For example, we have some activities like we work with the COMELEC, and we work with them as one of their stakeholders. And I have a photo here when we were invited to visit by the COMELEC to visit their warehouse in Santa Rosa, where all the VCM machines were kept. And these are the vote counting machines. And we were able to walk through and see how they were upgrading these machines, refurbishing these machines for the 2022 elections. Democracy Watch is also often a resource, serves as a resource speaker at the House and at the Senate, especially when it comes to issues of electoral reform and people's participation. Of course, like I said, we've also been doing voter education for the past 2 elections since 2016. Of course, before the pandemic, we were able to do all of this face to face, and I'm sharing some photos here of the voter education forum series that we did with the different schools. So, for example, we have here a photo in UP Diliman, in PUP, in the University of Santo Tomas. And one of the key things that we did there is with our partnership with COMELEC, through our partnership with COMELEC, we would go around and bring the VCMs, the machines, to the schools so that students would be able to test out the machines themselves. I think here, this is a better photo of that. You can see here that a lot of, obviously students, a lot of them are first-time voters. So it was all about, and at the time, the VCMs, the automated elections, was a very new thing. So it was about building trust with the process, familiarity with the process, so that first-time voters and young and students would be more confident when it comes to election day and have more trust that their votes will be counted. Of course, now, unfortunately, that's not something we can do because of the pandemic. we've of course not been able to go around and visit all of your schools. Fortunately, we do have this virtual medium where we're able to reach you pa rin and talk about these important issues. So of course, before it was all about the machines, but I'm sure now, I'm sure you still have questions about the machines, and I'm hoping that when uh, uh, Director James of the COMELEC arrives later, that he'll talk more about that. But at this point, maybe another issue that we want to talk about is also combating disinformation, because as we know, combating disinformation is a key challenge for the 2022 national elections. Um, so I this is an excerpt from something I wrote some time ago, but it's nowadays it's not always easy to be an informed voter. This is because of all the organized attempts to distort that informed vote through the strategic deployment of disinformation and online troll armies to harass dissenting voices. Voters can be manipulated. In the process, the will of voters can be prevented and democracy can be undermined. So obviously, we're all familiar with the term disinformation, fake news, and we know that it is a big issue. But perhaps what we don't realize is actually how our role is in propagating sometimes fake news, and at the same time what we can do consciously to combat against it. Um, so first, why is disinformation such a big thing now, especially election-related disinformation here in the Philippines? Professor Manhit actually covered this earlier, but I think it's worth reiterating. And that's because here in the Philippines, what makes us unique compared to the rest of the world is how we use the internet. We are now the second top user of the internet around the world. So we spend 10 hours a day connected to the internet. Now, like even me, and I'm sure you guys, if you think about it, you probably really do spend 10 hours a day on the internet, especially because you have to either work or go to school from remotely. So that's right away, if you work, that's like 8 hours a day on the internet, and then you have your 2 hours of Netflix, social media, and social media spread out all in between throughout the day. But I mean, and it's almost hard to imagine how on the opposite end of the spectrum that people in Japan only spend 4 hours of their day on the internet. I can't imagine what that would be like, and the fact that that's the case, I think it really shows how ingrained the use of the internet is, and how to our lives here in the Philippines, and as a result, how influential it can be in how we behave and how we think, and in the decisions that we make. And again, I'm just reiterating some information that you probably already know, but when it comes to the most used social media platforms for the Philippines, these are topped by YouTube and Facebook. Now, you can see this is data from January 2021. So I wouldn't be surprised if I found more recent data from 2022 that TikTok would probably be higher, as it is a very fast-growing platform. But as a result, because of how we use the internet, Filipinos increase, especially young Filipinos like you guys, are increase the risk and their exposure to information manipulation. So what is information manipulation? This is what we call disinformation. This is a common term, or fake news. But actually, technically there are three types of information manipulation, and it's good that we're aware of these three types, because as you'll see, as I'll talk about later, being aware of these things is a central and a critical step in being able to combat them. So first, misinformation. So what is misinformation? On a spectrum of the falseness and intent to harm, misinformation is unintentional mistakes such as inaccurate photo captions, dates, statistics, and translations, or when satire is taken seriously. So misinformation is not always intentional, but it is false, and it can be used to, it can have the effect of manipulating wrongly and the decisions and the behavior of people. In the middle, and then on the rightmost side, we have malinformation. So malinformation is the deliberate publication of private information or personal or corporate rather than public interest. This includes deliberate change of context, date, or time of genuine content. So something that an example of this is that you take a real photo of a rally from, let's say, Brazil, and then you change the caption and say that it was a photo taken somewhere in the Philippines for in support of a particular candidate. So that's an example of malinformation, where it's really intended to harm. And then in between, you have disinformation, which is a combination of both the intent to harm and the falseness. And this is really fabricated and manipulated content, which is intended to create conspiracy theories or rumors. So I think like a good example of this would be the deep fakes, right? Where with the technology and AI now, people, creative people usually, are able to take, let's say somebody, I'm sure you've seen like the Tom Cruise version, right? Where this guy has Tom Cruise's face on him and he's like cooking things and all of these normal non-Tom Cruise things. But that example can be applied to a political, to somebody who's politically motivated, and that could also have very, very dangerous effects on democracy and on the results of an election. But again, so those are the types of information manipulation. Now, what is information manipulation? Let's get into it more. And moving forward, I like probably you guys, before I brought it up, will just interchange the term information manipulation with disinformation, which is the most commonly used version type of this, right? So first, what is information manipulation? What is disinformation? It's a set of tactics, right, involving the collection and dissemination of information in order to influence or disrupt democratic decision making. So this is in the context of elections, of course. It's also intended to influence public attitudes or beliefs, persuade individuals to act or behave in a certain way, or sometimes incite hate and violence. And just to show you, these strategies, these set of tactics are implemented, are premeditated, oftentimes, right? They are planned out by most likely, especially during the elections, a team of professionals that are specifically trying to manipulate voters to vote a certain way, right? And when it comes to the well executed tactics, usually disinformation will gain influence organically through authentic channels and networks. So what does that mean? That means that if these troll farms, if these digital bad actors are really good at what they do, what they can do is that they can penetrate like your newsfeed, the groups that you're part of, and plant disinformation there, disinformation content, use their troll armies to amplify that and give it credibility, which in turn makes you, as a normal user, as a real person, as a real voter, share that or react and engage with it. And that's the thing, when you engage and when you share, you're actually you're giving it legitimacy. You're lending it your own legitimate capital, right? And you're acting as an amplifier for this disinformation. I mean, even Facebook in a report it had a couple of years ago acknowledged that users are now amplifiers. Facebook users are amplifiers of content, and as a result can be manipulated and can, as a result, lead to the spread of disinformation through these authentic channels. But so the question now is, I'm sure everybody knows about this information. The question is, what can we do? And this is a good question. And I am assuming why a lot of us are here. I mean, earlier when Kim was doing the poll, I did see that a lot were interested in fact checking. So the goal, one of the goals that I had entering this webinar was to give you guys the resources that you need to be able to do several things. The first is to be think about critical thinking, to think about fact checking, and to think about what we call digital advocacy. And I'll get through these three things in a bit. So first, again, I assume that a lot of you guys in schools these days are already talking about this, about being a critical thinker, about being, sometimes they call it digital literacy, right? Where young people like you, everybody, all of us, people who use digital tools and the internet, adopt this mindset where you're more critical of the things that you see, right? So, I mean, here are just some examples of that. So it's like when you, what it means to be a critical thinker is that online is that when you see information, when something is shared with you, is that you identify the source of that information. So that means when you get a link, let's say there's a headline that's a bit sensationalist, right? That you think that catches your attention, before you share, first thing you should do is you should identify the source. You should find out, is the source a reliable one? Is it news? Is it a blog, right? Is the news source a professional news and a reliable news source like a newspaper? Or perhaps is it one of those semi-news organizations that just a website with somebody creating articles in the background? This is linked, of course, to the second one, which is we have to verify before you share. Because keep in mind, I was saying earlier, this information spreads organically. And this is because sometimes when you share things, because when you share things, you're helping the engagement of certain content go up. And the effect is because engagement is going up, that the algorithm of the social media platforms thinks that this is something that people are interested in, and therefore it spreads it even more. So that's why it's important before you share to verify first the source and what's being said. And I can get to a bit of that more later on how you can verify before you share. Another thing you can do is diversify your perspectives by using different quality sources. So this means, liking a bunch of different pages, perhaps, right? Making sure that your news feed is filled not just with one perspective, but different perspectives. Because I think that's a critical part of critical thinking, right? It's being able to have your own position, your own idea, but still being able to take into consideration other perspectives. And at the end of the day, making a decision based on all of the information that you have. And of course, I think, and this is one that I'm going to get into a bit more, which is that we have to be aware that messages that we interact with online have been crafted for us. I think this is a very important realization and thing that we have to keep in mind, that everything you see online, somebody put thought into that with a target audience in mind. So if you're seeing it, it's possible that you're that target audience. And just by knowing that and accepting that, it gives you, the mindset that you need to be a critical thinker when it comes to what you see online. And, knowing that there are these, that people have designed the messages for you, it's important that we are also able to identify common information manipulation narratives. And guys, all of the information I'm sharing with you actually is part of playbooks that we've helped make or that we found, and I'm actually going to share them all with you later. But in the meantime, here are some common information manipulation narratives that we'll see online. So, for example, we'll see narratives that are polarizing and divisive. So we know this is like when people say dilawan, when they red tagging, all of these things, right? Or fake news. What? No, no. It's fake stream media, right? Where instead of talking about issues, what the objective of the content of the narrative is to drive a wedge between the readers based on how they stand on the issue. And usually, nga, as it says here, it inflames political, racial, religious, cultural, and gender divides. So that's one. Another one is the legitimization narratives, which undermines the integrity of the electoral process. We also see a lot of this, right? This is when we see content that tries to sow distrust in, let's say, automated elections, when in fact, we've with Democracy Watch have what do you call this? Conducted surveys in the past where we ask people, do you trust automated elections? And overwhelmingly, people have said that they do. Like 80% say that they were happy with the results of the 29 elections, and 90% say that they want to continue to see the use of automated elections in future elections. Yet you'll always see these narratives where people are saying that there's distrust in the process, that there's distrust in these automated elections. And it often forgets that before there was automated elections, there was widespread cheating when it came to the counting of votes and to vote buying. So that's again an example of the legitimization narratives. Another is political suppression narratives, and these are used to discourage certain groups from participating in politics. I'm sure you can come up with some of your own examples for this. And the fourth that I wanted to share is hate, harassment, and violence. So this is where content is used and to sow narratives where certain communities are made to perhaps fear voting because they might fear violence. They're being attacked directly. And this is, again, a strategy that we see a lot, not only for elections, but also when it comes to other disinformation-rich issues, right? Like, for example, COVID-19. So before there was, early on in the pandemic, there was a lot of hate speech directed at those in a community that had COVID-19. There was this one household, binabato sila ng bato ng mga neighbors nila, and that sort of behavior is also seen online, and it's important that we're able to identify it when we see it. Kim, send me a message if
No, go ahead.
All right. Sige. Thanks. So as part of being critical thinkers, I think it's also important that we be our own fact checkers, right? And this was a point raised earlier by you guys in the poll. And for this, really, I'd like to just point you to these two options. So, of course, if you're a critical thinker and you do your own research, then great, you're your own fact checker. Now, if you need some help and you're looking for resources that you can rely on because you don't know what you can or cannot rely on, I would recommend these two websites: Verifiles, which is an official fact-checking group that works with Facebook here in the Philippines, and Check.ph. Check.ph is a group connected with the University of the Philippines. And these are, educators, mass communication professionals, and journalists who have made it their mission to debunk fake news. And these two groups are very active. Both Verifiles and Check.ph post multiple times a day. And they also have Viber groups. So if you go to the websites, you'll find their websites, you'll actually find that they have links that you can click to join their community. And what happens, their Viber community, and what happens is that you will get updates through your Viber app when they come out with, when they debunk, when they fact check and they debunk fake news. So again, I really highly recommend these two groups, these two websites, if you're interested in fact checking and debunking fake news: Verifiles and check.ph. Check.ph actually joined us for our launch in last month, and they had a speaker, Professor Khan, who talked about not just what they were doing, but also the landscape of this information on in the Philippines. So if you're interested in that, you could actually go back and watch the recording on the Facebook page of I think our partners Stratbase, ADRi, and Democracy Watch. So be your own fact checker. That's another thing that we can do. And this is the third one that I mentioned. We can be digital advocates, right? So now that you're now aware of the kind of disinformation narratives that come by you, right? You're aware that messages are crafted for you. And you know that you should be checking facts, and you've found these reliable sources like check.ph and Verifiles. Now, what I implore students to do is to be your own digital advocate, right? So what does this mean? Be a digital advocate, we all know this really, is to be more proactive when it comes to raising awareness for combating disinformation. You can build a network of supporters, maybe perhaps, and then mobilize your network into action. So this could be like your group of friends or an org in your school where you come together and you actively push to combat disinformation. And this is, this is perfect for you guys, especially because you're young and you identify and you understand the differences between the platforms. And this is where my word file código is coming in, because I understand that Facebook is good for a certain thing. Perhaps it's good for storytelling and engaging your followers. But TikTok, on the other hand, is good for finding new followers, right? And posting short, engaging content. And each of these different platforms have their own purpose when it comes to reaching audiences. And you guys, as young people, have even better understanding of these different platforms than I do. And that's why I really encourage young people to be digital advocates when it comes to combating disinformation in social media. And again, and this is another thing, like for example, one of the resources that I'm sharing with you actually contains these tricks, right? So now that we're advocates, it's not just that we're receivers of this information. We're not only receiving it, we're now identifying it. Now we're also going to proactively push back against it. We're going to go on the offensive, and that's something that has to be done given the importance of the elections that are coming up. And that's why there are actually things that we can share with you like this, right? Which gives you some tricks on how best to position your content on social media to get the best reach. So these are actually tricks that are used against us by the disinformation actors. And what we're trying to do now is we're trying to push back and give people the tools that they need to be able to do that. So for example, I'm sharing here some algorithm tricks, right? About setting your post to public. And this is for Facebook to increase your page's engagement. You can, there's some content tips on when to post, what time to post. And also, again, the downsides of the Facebook algorithm. So later on, I'll be sharing a link to this resource, and it will have tricks, tips, not only for Facebook, for the other platforms as well, for these 5 top platforms. So I think it's something that I think everybody should have, everybody should look at and get familiar with, because it's a very useful, very useful information, not only for the purpose of advocating against disinformation, combating disinformation, but also just for your own purposes, maybe for your orgs, or maybe for your own small businesses or big businesses, I don't know. But yeah, so it's about proactively fighting against disinformation. And last but not least, as part of our fight against disinformation, we can report, right? We can report disinformation, and you can mark, posts as false news on Facebook. You can report on Twitter. Same thing with Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. They all have mechanisms built in for you to report this information when you see it. And sometimes, and I've included links here so that when you have the presentation, that you're able to access the help or the to-dos to see the steps of how to report on the different platforms. One thing also to keep in mind is the way algorithms work and the way the reporting system works for, let's say, platforms like Facebook. It doesn't necessarily, hindi nyo kailangan dumugin yung false news for it to be flagged and for it to be reviewed by Facebook, right? So sometimes there's this idea that, oh, we all have to come together and jump on fake news for it to be reviewed, and that if only one person does it, or if only 10 people do it, then maybe it won't work. It won't be reviewed by Facebook. That's actually not true. As long as somebody reports it, Facebook will have to review it. Their algorithm and their team has to review it. So my point here is, if we're all acting together, let's not be, discouraged from reporting or from proactively fighting against disinformation through the report features of these apps, because we think we're the only ones doing it. It's quite the opposite. All we need is one person to do something, and fake news can be taken down. So I think this is an important thing that we should also keep in mind: our power to report disinformation. And lastly, and this is the last, in addition to reporting, of course, as advocates, we're liking, commenting, and sharing, and we're reporting. And this is important because, as a whole of society approach is vital to combating disinformation. We know that the public and the private sector, civil society, and citizens like us all play important roles in this battle. But as informed voters, as responsible voters, it's our responsibility to think critically and become digital advocates for the truth and democracy. Democracy is threatened when the process of arriving at informed decisions on whom to vote for is deliberately manipulated, so that voters are manipulated, and political and social discussions are skewed. As responsible voters, we must be our own fact checkers, seek out information, and verify before we share. This is the last reminder that I wanted to leave with everybody. Yeah, no, sorry, I just got your message because so I'm looking at my watch. I'm looking at my watch. So thanks, Kim. Maybe I'll leave you guys on this screen, and these are some of the resources that I wanted to share. The Combating Information Manipulation Playbook for Elections and Beyond, and then IFES, which is International Foundation for Electoral Systems. They have a inclusive digital advocacy toolkit, which includes a toolkit where you can find yung mga the tips on content and all of those things for the different platforms. So IFES is one of our partners, which we've worked with on this information in the past. There are also some other resources that I wanted to share as well, such as Facebook has its own Digital Tayo platform, which is essentially their own digital literacy tool. And then Globe also has a good one, and they have actually partnered with DepEd on their tool called Digital Thumbprint Program. Perhaps dapat nandito rin yung Verifiles, the Verifiles and the check.ph links, because I think those 6 are really the best useful resources for you. Perhaps the 7th, if I may add, would be the Democracy Watch Facebook page, which I also encourage everybody to like and share, to like and to visit. So there, actually, I'd like to end there. So thanks so much, everybody, for listening. I'll stop sharing now, and I'll turn it back over to you, Kim.
Okay. So Dr. Serrano actually has joined us now. Dr. Serrano, are you there? You're on mute, but wait. I see him in our panel, so maybe we
Yes,
can
I'm here.
Yes, wonderful. Hello po, Dr.
Yeah.
Serrano. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Yeah, nasa Bataan po kayo ngayon, no? You're in Bataan, I think. But this is,
Hello.
hi sir, can you hear us? Hello?
Yes,
Hi.
yes,
Kasi
I'm just
yeah.
getting my
Po. Yan. So,
earphone.
okay. So actually, sakto, I think we can, since Dr. Serrano might have limited time, we can proceed the quick open forum with Dr. Serrano to perhaps, so we can perhaps ask some questions. So the floor is open for anyone who has questions for Dr. Serrano from the PPCRV, the Parish Pastoral Council for Responsible, or for Sir Paco on this. So, yes. Dr. Serrano, can you hear us?
Yes,
Okay. So there were actually some questions earlier from the floor. I'll just get to open it for a bit. Okay. So I think one question that you can perhaps answer is may mga nagtatanong po about the transparency of elections, or how reliable is it, the vote counting process. I think there are some concerns of perhaps cheating, or yeah, if so. Yun po, is it accurate? Is the vote counting that will be done on the May 9 polls, will it be accurate? And how can we trust in the machines? That's a question po.
Baka Doc,
So
Doc
you're on mute
Arwin.
po. Yeah, you're on
Baka
mute.
Doc Arwin
Ayan.
wants to answer.
Yeah, he's on mute. Wait. Sir, naka-mute po kayo. Hindi ko po kayo marinig.
Baka
Doc Arwin. You're muted po. Sir. Ayan. I think he'll unmute.
Yan.
Ayan.
Narinig ba ako?
Apo, naririnig na po kayo ngayon. So, yun po yung tanong.
Yes. First of all, maraming salamat sa Democracy Watch at maraming salamat din sa ating mga nakikinig, no, from the 6 schools there in Visayas and Mindanao. Tanggalin ko kaya yung aking.
Sir, you're a bit choppy po. Sir. Dr. Serrano.
his audio works.
Yeah.
Ayan, okay na siya?
Ayan, okay na po siya.
Okay na siya, no?
Apo, naririnig po namin kayo.
Sige,
It might be, apo. Sige po.
Yan, naririnig na ako.
Yes.
Apo.
Yes po.
Yeah, okay. So, regarding transparency and credibility, yan din yung isa sa mga pangunahin na sinusulong natin. Kaya nga my dear young voters, we wanted to assure you na every step of the way, every preparation process na ginagawa ng COMELEC, we try our very best to be there and to see to it na kami yung nakakadagdag din ng assurance sa general public about the very good preparations of COMELEC. Gusto natin na malaman din ang ilan sa mga mahalaga na mga katanungan ng ating mga botante at ganoon din ng ating general public. And nagkaroon nga talaga ng ilang mga challenges and problems because of the reasons brought about by this pandemic situation. Pero dahil ngayon ay gumaganda naman ang situation natin dito, not only here in Metro Manila but also in most parts of our country, at tuloy-tuloy na ito at saka talagang magiging maganda na yung magiging ugnayan at saka yung pagbabantay na gagawin namin between now and up to election day. In fact, even after election day, marami rin kami mga kampanya na nagagawin pa doon sa aming command center operation sa UST because of the fourth copy of the AR, election returns, na kinukuha namin from the precinct at ini-encode natin yan sa University of Santo Tomas para sa gayon makadagdag din ng credibility at saka doon sa assurance na ang ating eleksyon ay talaga naman magiging maayos at katanggap-tanggap. So I don't know, Kim, kung yun yung narinig ko sa iyo kanina kasi medyo choppy nga kanina.
Opo. Pero nakakatulong po. Thank you, Dr. Serrano. Ayun, it helps. It's good po na meron po tayong representatives from the civil society sector to help watch the polls and to ensure na walang dayaang nagaganap. So thank you. We have a next question, and I'll remind the participants they can ask questions through the question and answer portion. So you talked po about how to vote wisely in
Yes.
yeah, it's very encouraging po. So what are your tips po for students or for the youth who want to encourage other people to vote wisely as well? How should they communicate sa kanilang mga pamilya, mga kaibigan, kung paano kaya nila mahihikayat yung mga networks nila na mag-vote din ng wisely, makapili?
Yes, thank you very much, Kim. Una-una, I hope and pray na pinakinggan nyo mabuti hindi lang yung presentation ko, kundi pati yung presentation ng ating dalawa pa na nagsalita rin kanina. At ito naman ay according sa Democracy Watch ay naka-Facebook Live. So,
yes,
so ibig sabihin dahil Facebook Live, merong Facebook Replay. So pwede nilang i-share yung link na ito doon sa mga hindi nakapanood, hindi nakapakinig at i-share nila 'yon. At kahit na Facebook Replay yan, pwede pa rin naman sila magtanong. At ibato lang sa amin yung tanong at pipilitin namin sa abot ng aming makakaya na masagot yung mga katanungan na yon. And then try to also encourage and influence others regarding doon sa need talaga na maging mapanuri, maging makilatis, maging magandog tayo, mag-alay tayo ng isang matalino, maayos at pinagdasal na boto. Ayaw natin na ating mga kabataang botante ay hindi gagamitin itong pagkakataon na ito dahil meron pa naman tayong sapat na panahon. Meron pa tayong 45 to 46 days to go bago maghalalan. Ang encouragement din namin dito ay maglista tayo ng ating mga gustong iboto mula sa nasyonal hanggang mapalokal. At tayo talaga ang bida rito. Tayo ang nanunuri dito sa mga aplikanteng umaharap sa atin. At gusto natin, nakilatisin natin sila mabuti. Huwag lang yung basta-basta tayo padadala dahil sa kung ano-ano mga iba't ibang mga factors na mga hindi ko nabanggit kanina sa aking recorded presentation. Pero gusto ko rin na ating gagawing sa pagbili ng ating mga kagamitan umaharap sa atin. Napakahalaga ng mga posisyon na kanilang gustong makamtan at ito ay talagang makakaapekto sa kinabukasan ninyo. Alalahanin ninyo, dagdag 6 na taon nito mula sa inyong present na edad. Kung kayo ay 19, pag dinagdagan natin ng 6 yan, ay lumalabas ay 25 years old na kayo after this cycle of election. Kaya mas mahalaga yan sa inyo kumpara pa sa amin. At niyanais talaga namin na magkaroon kayo ng magandang panibagong bukas o kinabukasan na talagang inaasahan. At kaisa nyo kami sa pagnanais ng magkaroon tayo ng mga magagaling, magigiting at maayos na liderato sa lahat ng posisyon na naka-open ngayong darating na eleksyon. So, yan talaga isa sa mga panawagan, tatlo actually yan. Una, makinig tayo mabuti at talagang kunin natin ang mga mahalaga at mga nakita nating magagandang mga natutunan natin. Pangalawa, gusto natin na hikayatin rin ninyo ang inyong mga kasama sa bahay, pamilya, kamag-anak, at mga kaibigan at kamag-aral. At pangatlo, gusto natin din na maghandog tayo ng isang matalino, pinagdasal na maayos na boto base doon sa ginawa nating paglilista. At sinasabi ko nga na marami pa tayong sapat na panahon para gawin ito. Harinawa, marami talaga tayong natutunan at hindi na sayang ang oras ninyo. At ganun din ang amin din mga ilang sakripisyo at mga pag-aalay para sa gayon patuloy namin kayong bigyan ng gabay. Sabi ko na ito ay gabay, kayo pa rin na magpapasya. Ito ay added tools, pero kayo pa rin na magpapasya. Ito ay mga magagandang pagkakataon, pero kayo pa rin na magpapasya. Kaya mga minamahal namin at ginigiliw namin mga kabataan na nandito ngayon sa Zoom, sa Facebook, o even sa YouTube, naway mapaunlakan yung tatlong request ko niyo.
Thank you po, Dr. Serrano. There's one last question. If you have time po for one last question, and then if you need to go po, that's okay. Ano pong magagawa namin sa mga taong to the people that refuses to accept the truth? Ayaw po kasi talagang maniwala. Yun yung sabi dun sa tanong. Sir.
Try your very best to be a good influencer, encourager, at saka maging maganda yung talakayan na gagawin natin doon sa ating kakausapin. Huwag tayo o iwasan natin ang makipag-away at huwag tayo maglalabis sa ating gagawing argumento. Ang argumento naman ay pwede rin naman positibo, pero pwede rin niyang maging negatibo. Depende doon sa kauwian ng argumento na yon. Pero ang bottom line nito, ano man ang mangyari, ang ating pakipagkaibigan sa taong kinakausap natin, ang ating magandang pakikitungo at pakipagkapwa sa kinakausap natin ay hindi mababawasan o hindi magiging negatibo. At panghuli, gusto din natin na mag-practice din tayo. Ano ibig ko sabihin? Sa pakikipag-usap natin, whether sa larangan ng politika o sa iba mang mga usapin, ito ay practice natin habang bata pa tayo. At dahil dito sa mga pagpapractice na ito, later on, gumagaling tayo bilang tao. Lalo tayong nagiging maunawain at makalinga at talaga namang gagamitin natin itong mga angking galing na ito hanggang sa ating pagtanda. At practicein ito kasi later on, ang makakaharap natin ay mas talagang pwede natin masabing mga mas pilosopo, mas magagaling sa atin at talagang baka pwede tayong maapektuhan, baka siguro dulot ng kanilang edad o status sa buhay. Pero ang gusto natin, hindi dapat tayo naapektuhan sa mga ganun. Ako, diyan ako nasanay, diyan ako nahubog, at diyan ako gumaling. At hanggang ngayon nga, kahit na medyo nakatatanda na ako sa inyo, ay talaga namang tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang aking pag-aaral, tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang aking pagpapahusay, at tuloy-tuloy pa rin ang aking ginagawang maging magaling na influencer o encourager or positive contributor o kaya isang magaling sa larangan ng pakikipagkapwa. Habang buhay, hindi tayo natutulog, hindi tayo humihinto. Dapat patuloy pa rin tayo na ayusin, pagalingin at paigtingin ang ating mga angking galing. So harinawa itong pakikilahok ninyo, itong aktibong pakikilahok ninyo ay nagdagdag din para lalong umigting ang ating mga angking galing o yung tinatawag natin na sa wikang Ingles na mga life skills na dapat natin gamitin along the way habang tayo ay palaki, payabong, patanda na rin, at saka hanggang sa ating mga iba pang mas mahihigpit na mga pagsubok na tatahakin at madadaanan along the way.
Salamat po, Dr. Serrano. So yeah, but those are the questions from the floor. We will be moving to a different segment of the program. Pero po, you are free to stay for the rest of the activity. Pero if you have to go po, sir, we understand. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Doc Arwin.
Thank you po. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Paco. Thank you sa Democracy Watch.
Salamat po, sir. Thank you. All right. So, to our attendees here, thank you for staying with us thus far. I hope that it's been very insightful for you, learning about disinformation, learning about good values, learning how to try to convince other people to also vote wisely as well. And sometimes it really does take persistence. Sometimes it requires you to keep engaging. And I know that it can get tiring. Minsan nakakapagod siya. But then it is work that does eventually yield returns, yield fruit. So to segue into the next portion of our program, we will go back to Slido. So I will share my screen this time. Sorry about that. So please join on Slido for our activity. So there, we just have a few questions for everyone attending. So once you've joined, this is our first question, since we were talking about social media earlier. Just a quick poll, warm-up poll. Those joining. Okay. Maraming Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Wala pang ayan, may TikTok na. I'm past the age of TikTok already.
Is there such a thing?
What? Wala. Di na ako marunong mag-TikTok. Okay, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. Yeah, Facebook remains to be a very popular platform. Okay. Insta, YouTube, more YouTube. Okay, I think we have our warm-up question done. So just a process check before we move on to a next speaker. So marami nga talagang gumagamit ng Facebook na.
I'm surprised though, 25% lang yung TikTok, given the
It's okay. I mean,
demographic we have.
this is mostly I think we mostly have university students, and I think it's those in high school who use TikTok.
You really think TikTok's for younger, that young of a crowd? That's interesting.
Yeah, no, because I have cousins who are like in their teens, so they use TikTok. So they ask me about news that they see on TikTok and if it's true or not. So I think a reminder then for everyone in the webinar now is, I'm sorry if you can hear my background noise. May
It's okay.
nagdi-drill sa labas. But something to keep in mind, something to watch out for is if someone you know, especially someone younger, even if they're not of voting age, if they ask about history or about facts, it is helpful to engage them, and not even in an argumentative way, but just in a way that seeks to educate, well, seeks to inform them of what has happened. Okay, so next poll, before moving on, because we did get some questions earlier about vote counting machines. So what is your key learning so far? So you can type whatever words, so whatever you've learned. Me personally, my key learning so far is the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Yes, vote wisely. That is correct. Values to vote wisely. Right. How information can be manipulated, critical thinking, reliable sources. That's true. I remember back when I was in university, it was very important. My teachers for my research classes would tell me that you have to verify what sources you're getting your information from. You can't just use random blogs you find online. So you do have to. Yeah. So, okay. Vote wisely, fact checking, polarizing and divisive content, discerning voters. Yeah. Importance of fact checking, especially today, when information can really be manipulated. I think it's a very different environment now compared to, let's say, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And even Professor Manhit earlier on in his slides, he showed that social media or the internet was not a very influential source of information for choosing a presidential candidate back in the 2010 and 2016 elections. But now you have it, you see it rising in influence. So yeah, and practice critical thinking, vote wisely. Effects of misinformation, that's true. And actually, this is wonderful because after having discussed fact checking and voting wisely, we do have with us now someone from an esteemed guest from the Commission on Elections who can answer more of your questions once we are done with this section. Good day, sir. Welcome to our event. Okay, so reliable sources, 5 good citizenship values of Makatao. I like the one on being peace-loving. That's very important in this day and age when we all usually just fight people who disagree with our views. Yeah, importance of fact-checking, to be mindful and vote the deserving one. That's a very interesting point. And I think it shows that we do have to do our homework in studying the platforms and character of presidential candidates, or not just presidential, but any candidates, especially campaign period for the local elections is coming up soon. So yeah, voting wisely does not just span voting for national candidates, but even your mayor, your governor, your congressman. Yeah, very important. What else? The advocates against disinformation, patience to enlighten the misinformed. That's an interesting point. So, okay. So thank you for your input. I will now stop sharing my screen. And so now we have with us, as I mentioned earlier, we have with us from the Commission on Elections, Director James Jimenez. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. We know you're busy. Thank you for making time for us. There are some questions here for the Commission on Elections. There was one question earlier on how we can trust the results of vote counting machines, or how accurate are the results. Doc Arwin from PPCRV responded earlier, but we would also like to hear your take on the question as to how we can rely on these results.
Thank you very much. And I'm really sorry for being late. As to the question, it's a very relevant question. And I would point you first and foremost to the track record of the automated election system. The automated election system has been used since 2010. It was used in 2013, in 2016, and again in 2019. And it was used for the election of 2 presidents who enjoyed unquestioned mandates. So as far as track record goes, which is, a very big indicator, you have a system that you can trust, that is reliable. But on top of the track record, I would also point your attention to external things, such as, for example, the random manual audit. The random manual audit has been conducted after every elections, and it has consistently shown that the machines are reliable and accurate up to 99.99% of the time, which means they are very reliable, and to all intents and purposes, you can, in fact, actually be sure that the results are accurate. On top of that, we have our partnerships with our citizens' arm. PPCRV, for example, has a manual tallying of the election returns. One of the main features of the automated election system is that canvassing is automated. PPCRV has gone ahead and conducted a manual consolidation of results, meaning to say, they would collect all of those election returns and by hand compute them to make sure that the electronic tally of the consolidation and canvassing is accurate. And again, over the years that they've actually done this, they have often proven, and they've always proven, the accuracy of the system. And finally, the design of the system itself. The design of the system itself actually predisposes against cheating. The reason for this is because there are many redundancies in the system, such that if you try to cheat one part of the system, it would automatically pop up in a different part of the system. This is what we call tamper evident. The system, if it is ever tampered, will immediately flag the tampering, and the tampered results will immediately be quarantined and removed from the final total, which means that the end result will be guaranteed clean and free from any polluted source. And then these are the reasons why we're very confident that the automated election system gives us accurate and reliable election results.
Thank you, Director James. There are a few more questions from the floor. Next question is, I would just like to ask regarding why there is no voter issuance of voters' IDs anymore in the COMELEC. Why is it voter certification now?
Well, in 2012, we stopped printing the voter IDs in preparation, so we thought at the time, for the issuance of the national ID, which at the time was planned to replace the voter ID. Unfortunately, the national ID doesn't seem to be engineered to actually perform as a voter's ID, and so this decision will probably be reconsidered. But for now, we are not issuing voter IDs.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question, since we have a lot of students from Visayas and Mindanao, there's a question, are there ways that students can participate in the 2022 elections if they are not of voting age yet?
Well, absolutely. Those who are not of voting age are in fact pre-voters, right? Meaning to say, At some point, they will, in fact, become voters themselves. And so you can never start participating too early, right? How? If you are of the pre-voting age, that is to say, maybe you're in high school or maybe you're in the upper grades of your school, you can start by participating in lectures where people talk about the democratic rights of citizens. One of the main things about elections is that it is not just about voting on election day. It is about instilling a mindset in the youth. It's about instilling a democracy mindset in the youth so that we, by default, and as an integral part of our decision making, tend towards democratic processes and reject autocratic or dictatorial tendencies. So, dyan pa lang, kailangan binubuo na yung isip ng kabataan natin to accept democratic ways of thinking. You can also encourage and influence those who are older than you to vote according to their beliefs and to their values. One of the biggest motives of voters, I believe, is their personal self-interest. Okay? Kung ano yung okay sa akin, kung ano yung mahalaga sa akin, yun ang magdidesisyon kung anong iboboto ko. And as non-voting youth, we are equally important to our relatives who are going to vote. We are equally important to the family. And it is up to us, if you are non-voters yet, to emphasize that, to be the voice of their conscience, to remind them that the people they vote for will not just impact them, but will more importantly impact future generations. Kasama dyan yung non-voters. And finally, non-voters should start preparing themselves to vote. Paano? They should start looking at the issues. They should start understanding what the issues are, what the political trends are, and what is important to the life of the nation. If one of the things that you talked about today was misinformation, tama? And one of the primary topics of misinformation is historical revisionism. The reason historical revisionism is so rampant, the reason it is such a problem now, is because we have a generation of people who ignored history, who basically said, tapos na yan. Let's move forward. Let's think of other things. They forgot the lessons of history. And because they did not look at history in that sense, they are now prey to those who would change their appreciation of history. Kung hindi mo alam kung ano nangyari, kung hindi mo pinag-aralan yung pinanggalingan mo, anyone can come along and say, hindi, maganda noon. Hindi, mali ka. Dati, libre ang gasolina. Dati, lumilipad ang baboy. Di ba? So, it is easy for you to be misled if you have no grounding in what is happening in your history. So, kabataan, especially the pre-voters, history is happening before your very eyes. History is unfolding right now. Kung hindi kayo aware sa mga nangyayari ngayon, 3 years, 6 years down the line, anyone can lie to you and tell you, hindi, maganda nun. Diba? Anyone can tell you noon, and anyone can tell you down the line na, hindi, nung panahon na yon, nako, tinalo natin ang COVID in 6 weeks. And what would you have to say to them? Wala. Because you are not paying attention now. So as pre-voters, that is perhaps your biggest challenge, to pay attention now and to listen to the issues now so that ngayon pa lang, kahit hindi pa kayo bumoboto, meron na kayong framework sa isip nyo para pagdating ng panahon, marunong na kayong pumili ng tama.
Thank you, Director James. If you would indulge us, we have around 2 more questions left, if that's okay.
No problem.
Thank you. So yeah, sorry to our participants, we're going a little over time, but 10 more minutes. Okay, so is COMELEC working with social media platforms to fight election-related disinformation?
Absolutely. Kami po ay partners ng Facebook at ng iba pang social media platforms para tulungan kami na magpabagsak ng mga fake news sites at magpatanggal ng fake news articles. No? Hindi sa lahat ng pagkakataon na natatanggal natin yung fake news site, but definitely yung mga identified na fake news articles pinapatanggal po natin. We are on what is called the white list, so that pag COMELEC ang nag-report, mas mabilis ang action ng platform.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next question. What are some of the COMELEC's efforts in overseeing violations during the campaign period?
Well, definitely yung ating Oplan Baklas na alam niyo naman naging very controversial. No? Pero ipagpapatuloy natin yan. No? Maliban na lamang doon sa pagbabaklas ng mga materials sa mga private properties. So tuloy pa rin ang baklas. Number 2, meron tayong task force kontra vote buying kasi yan ang pinakakalat na violation sa campaign period, yung pamimigay ng boto ng pera para sa boto, no? At hindi lamang pera, Kim. We're also talking about other things, basta things of value. Ang problema dito is that for our netizens or citizens or on the internet, normally pag nakakita sila ng mga ganyang video, gusto nila disqualify kaagad. Gusto nila tanggal kaagad. Unfortunately, hindi po ganun yon. May pagdadaan ng due process yan kung saan kailangan pa natin imbestigahan at kasuhan. At once nakasuhan natin, dadaan pa yan sa huwes, sa hukom, para mapagdesisyonan. Kaya nga, napakahalaga, palagi natin sinasabi, mahalaga po na may complainant. Kasi yung complainant talaga ang magdadala ng kasong yan. Siya yung magrereklamo at siya yung magiging witness doon sa nangyaring vote buying. Sa part ng COMELEC, we will try to streamline that process as much as possible. We will protect you if you want to complain anonymously. We will do that. Pero kailangan tulong-tulungan po tayo.
Thank you, Director James. So finally, I think, as siguro as a closing from your end na rin po, no? What is your advice to the youth for the upcoming elections and future elections? And if there are any other key takeaways you'd like them to have?
Okay, thank you very much, Kim. And I'm sorry this is gonna take a little bit more than your ordinary closing message kasi humahabol ako doon sa presentation na na-miss ko. But let me just distill it to this. In order to be a good voter, in order to be a voter who votes correctly, number 1, you must start with yourself. Take stock of your values. Alamin mo kung anong mahalaga sa'yo. Remember, yung hinahalal mo ay kinatawan mo lamang. They are representatives of you. Meaning to say, sila ang tatayo sa lugar mo sa gobyerno. How can they represent you if they believe differently from you? Kung ikaw halimbawa naniniwala ka sa equality and diversity, paano ka i-represent ng isang misogynist? Paano ka i-represent ng isang taong elitista? Hindi mangyayari yon. Magagamit yung posisyon para sa kanilang motibo at hindi para sa kapakanan mo. So number 1, list down your values and find out for yourself ano ang mahalaga sa'yo. Sabi nga ni Katy Perry, if you don't stand for anything, you will fall for everything. Kung wala kang paninindigan, kahit ano, mabubudol ka. Okay? Number 2, pay attention. Sinasabi ko yan palagi. Pay attention to what's happening. Alamin nyo kung anong issue. Alamin nyo kung anong mga posisyon ng mga politiko sa mga issue na yan. Dahil alam nyo, ang mga politiko, ang galing yan magpapogi. Lalo na pagpalapit na ang eleksyon. Pagpalapit ng eleksyon, wala ng politikong pangit. Lahat ng politiko, pogi na yan. Lahat ng ugali, maganda na. Lahat ng sagot, mabait. Pero, hindi sa lahat ng pagkakataon, ganyan sila. May mga posisyon yan na kuminsan hindi ka sasang-ayon, pero madadala ka sa pasayaw-sayaw. Kaya ingat. Please make sure that you are paying attention to what they say. Parang magic yan. Pag may nakikita kang magulo na kamay, hindi dyan nangyayari ang magic. Nangyayari yung magic somewhere else. So pay attention. Okay? Number 3, gamitin nyo ang social media. na sa social media marami kang makukuhang information. At hindi lamang tungkol sa mga politiko. Marami kang makukuhang information galing sa ibang sources. Right now, ang pangkaraniwang Pilipino ay naniniwala sa magulang, sa jowa, sa teacher para malaman kung sino iboboto niya. Okay yun. Okay maniwala sa magulang, sa jowa, sa teacher. Okay yan. Pero marami pang ibang sources. At ultimately, kailangan ikaw ang nagdidesisyon dahil ikaw ang gumagalaw ng pen sa araw ng botohan. Ikaw, hindi ang magulang mo, hindi ang jowa mo, hindi ang teacher mo. In fact, hindi nila alam kung sino binoto mo. Kaya ikaw ang magdidesisyon. So dapat ready ka, dapat handa ka, at napag-isipan mong mabuti. Okay? So yan ang tatlong pinakamahalagang advice ko sa mga kabataan na gustong bumoto sa darating na halalan at nagbabalak bumoto sa mga darating pang eleksyon. Magandang umaga po.
Magandang umaga, Director James. Maraming salamat po. And I think talagang helpful yun. It's helpful to be reminded that these are people who are representing us. And kanina po, si Dr. Serrano, he raised the point na do we hold the representatives or the candidates to the standards we hold ourselves to? And I think that's a very good takeaway as we move forward from this event. So that ends our formal program, official program. Thank you so much, Director James, for joining
Thank
us. And I hope that this was helpful for you students. And thank you, Sir Paco, also for giving us a very comprehensive talk on disinformation. And Dr. Serrano is no longer here. He is busy with a PPCRV activity. But we would also like to thank him for even making the time to join us during the open forum. And please, and one last thing, do make sure that you are paying attention to what the candidates are saying, as Director James noted. So thank you very much for joining us again. This presentation will be, the recording of the event will be on Facebook and on the Stratbase YouTube. And you will also see a blog post on the ADRinstitute.org. If you need your certificate of participation, please just email me. I will chat my email, but you should have it, and some of you might have emailed me before. I will get back to you soonest regarding your certificates. Thank you again. Salamat kayo. I hope I pronounced that right. If I did not, I am very sorry. But thank you and have a nice day. Happy lunch. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Director James. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Thank you, Director James. Thank you, Sir Paco. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.